Long before European settlers arrived, the land we now call the United States was home to diverse Native American tribes. These indigenous peoples had rich cultures, complex societies, and deep connections to the land. From the Iroquois Confederacy in the Northeast to the Pueblo peoples of the Southwest, Native Americans developed advanced agricultural practices, built thriving communities, and traded across vast networks. The arrival of Europeans in the late 15th century would forever change their world. But the legacy of Native Americans remains a vital part of U.S. history, reminding us of the land's original inhabitants and their enduring contributions. European exploration and early contact, 1492 to 1607. In 1492, Christopher Columbus's voyage marked the beginning of European exploration in the Americas. Spanish explorers like Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro conquered vast empires in Central and South America, while others ventured north. The Spanish established St. Augustine, Florida in 1565, the oldest permanent European settlement in the U.S. Meanwhile, French and English explorers began mapping the Atlantic coast. These early encounters between Europeans and Native Americans were often marked by conflict, disease, and cultural exchange, setting the stage for colonization. The founding of Jamestown, 1607. In 1607, the English established their first permanent settlement in North America. Jamestown, Virginia. The settlers faced immense challenges, including disease, starvation, and conflict with the Powhatan Confederacy. John Smith's leadership and the introduction of tobacco as a cash crop helped the colony survive. However, the arrival of enslaved Africans in 1619 marked the beginning of a dark chapter in American history. Jamestown's success paved the way for further English colonization along the Atlantic coast. The Pilgrims and Plymouth Colony, 1620. In 1620, the Pilgrims, a group of English separatists seeking religious freedom, arrived aboard the Mayflower. They established Plymouth Colony in present-day Massachusetts. The Pilgrims faced a harsh first winter, but with the help of the Wampanoag people, they learned to cultivate crops like corn and celebrated the first Thanksgiving in 1621. Plymouth became a symbol of perseverance and religious freedom, inspiring future settlements in New England. The 13 colonies, 1607 to 1754. By the mid-18th century, 13 British colonies had been established along the Atlantic coast. These colonies were divided into 3 regions: New England, the Middle Colonies, and the Southern Colonies. New England focused on shipbuilding and trade, the Middle Colonies on agriculture and industry, and the Southern Colonies on cash crops like tobacco and rice, cultivated by enslaved Africans. Despite their differences, the colonies shared a growing sense of identity and resentment toward British control. The French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763. The French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763, was a conflict between Britain and France over control of North America. The British victory secured their dominance but left them in massive debt. To pay for the war, Britain imposed taxes on the colonies, sparking resentment. The war also gave young George Washington valuable military experience, which would later prove crucial in the American Revolution. The Treaty of Paris in 1763 ended the war, but set the stage for future tensions between Britain and its colonies. The road to revolution, 1763 to 1775. After the French and Indian War, Britain imposed a series of taxes on the colonies, including the Stamp Act and the Tea Act. These measures were met with widespread protests, including the Boston Tea Party in 1773. The colonists' rallying cry, "No taxation without representation," reflected their growing desire for self-governance. Tensions escalated, leading to the battles of Lexington and Concord in 1775, the first military engagements of the American Revolution. The Declaration of Independence, 1776, On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, penned by Thomas Jefferson. The document declared the colonies' independence from Britain and outlined the principles of liberty and equality. The Revolutionary War had already begun, with George Washington leading the Continental Army. The Declaration marked a turning point, uniting the colonies in their fight for freedom. The Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783. The Revolutionary War was a grueling conflict between the American colonies and Britain. Key battles, such as Saratoga and Yorktown, turned the tide in favor of the colonists. The harsh winter at Valley Forge tested the Continental Army's resolve, but foreign aid from France and Spain proved crucial. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris officially recognized the United States as an independent nation. The Articles of Confederation, 1781 to 1789. After independence, the U.S. operated under the Articles of Confederation, a weak central government that struggled to maintain order. Shays' Rebellion in 1786 highlighted the need for a stronger federal system. In 1787, delegates met at the Constitutional Convention to draft a new framework of government. The result was the U.S. Constitution, which established a federal system with checks and balances. The Constitution and Bill of Rights, 1787 to 1791. The U.S. Constitution, ratified in 1788, created a strong federal government with three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. George Washington became the first president in 1789. To address concerns about individual rights, the Bill of Rights was added in 1791. These first 10 amendments guaranteed freedoms like speech, religion, and assembly, laying the foundation for American democracy. The Early Republic, 1789 to 1815. The Early Republic was a time of nation-building. Alexander Hamilton's financial plans stabilized the economy, while Thomas Jefferson's Louisiana Purchase in 1803 doubled the nation's size. The War of 1812 against Britain reaffirmed U.S. independence and fostered a sense of national identity. By 1815, the United States was poised for westward expansion and growth. Westward Expansion and Manifest Destiny, 1815 to 1860. The 19th century saw the United States expand westward, driven by the belief in manifest destiny, the idea that Americans were destined to spread across the continent. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 doubled the nation's size, while the Oregon Trail and California Gold Rush drew thousands of settlers. However, this expansion came at a great cost to Native Americans, who were displaced and subjected to violence. By 1860, the United States stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific, but tensions over slavery threatened to tear the nation apart. The Civil War and Reconstruction, 1861 to 1877. The Civil War, fought from 1861 to 1865, was the bloodiest conflict in U.S. history. It pitted the industrial North against the agrarian South, which relied on enslaved labor. President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 declared freedom for enslaved people in Confederate states. The Union's victory in 1865 preserved the nation and ended slavery, but the Reconstruction era that followed was marked by racial tension and violence. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments abolished slavery, granted citizenship, and protected voting rights. But the promise of equality remained unfulfilled for many. Industrialization and the Gilded Age, 1877 to 1900. The late 19th century saw rapid industrialization, transforming the United States into an economic powerhouse. Railroads connected the nation, while inventions like the light bulb and telephone revolutionized daily life. The Gilded Age was a time of great wealth for industrialists like Rockefeller and Carnegie, but it also brought poverty, labor unrest, and political corruption. Immigrants flocked to cities, seeking opportunity, but faced harsh working conditions and discrimination. This era laid the groundwork for the progressive reforms of the early 20th century. The Progressive Era and World War I, 1900 to 1919. The Progressive Era brought reforms to address the social and economic challenges of industrialization. Leaders like Theodore Roosevelt fought for workers' rights, conservation, and trust-busting. Women's suffrage gained momentum, culminating in the 19th Amendment in 1920, which granted women the right to vote. World War I, 1914 to 1918, saw the United States emerge as a global power. Although initially neutral, the U.S. entered the war in 1917, helping to secure an Allied victory. The Roaring Twenties and the Great Depression, 1920 to 1939. The 1920s were a time of economic prosperity and cultural change. Jazz, flappers, and the Harlem Renaissance defined the era, but Prohibition also led to organized crime. The stock market crash of 1929 triggered the Great Depression, plunging the nation into economic despair. Unemployment soared, and families struggled to survive. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal programs aimed to revive the economy and provide relief, but recovery was slow and uneven. World War II and the post-war era, 1939 to 1960. World War II, 1939 to 1945, transformed the United States into a global superpower. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the U.S. joined the Allies, playing a key role in defeating the Axis powers. The post-war era saw economic growth and the rise of suburban life, but also the beginning of the Cold War with the Soviet Union. The civil rights movement gained momentum, challenging racial segregation and inequality. The civil rights movement and social change, 1960 to 1980. The 1960s were a time of profound social change. The civil rights movement, led by figures like Martin Luther King Jr., fought for racial equality, culminating in landmark legislation like the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Vietnam War and anti-war protests divided the nation, while the feminist and environmental movements gained traction. In 1969, the U.S. achieved a historic milestone with the Apollo 11 moon landing. Modern America, 1980-present. The late 20th and early 21st centuries have seen the United States navigate challenges and opportunities. The end of the Cold War in 1991 marked a new era of global leadership. The 9/11 attacks in 2001 reshaped U.S. foreign policy, while technological advancements like the Internet revolutionized society. Today, the U.S. continues to grapple with issues like climate change, inequality, and political polarization, while striving to uphold its founding ideals of liberty and justice for all. The history of the United States is a story of resilience, innovation, and the pursuit of freedom. From its humble beginnings as a group of colonies to its rise as a global superpower, the U.S. has faced challenges and triumphs that have shaped the world. What do you think is the most defining moment in U.S. history? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing content. Until next time, keep exploring the wonders of our world.